Welcome to our immigration briefing show, where we delve into the latest migratory currents and debates swirling around the globe. Grab a cup of tea, and let's catch up on the world's movements and shakes. Starting off in the UK, where the temperature's rising over plans to deport refugees to Rwanda. It seems like not everyone's on board with this idea, including a 91-year-old British peer and Holocaust survivor, Alfred Dubs, calling it shameful. And guess what? The House of Lords isn't having any of it either, refusing the Safety of Rwanda, Asylum and Immigration bill. But there's a twist in the tale. Rwanda is gearing up for these deportations, with the first batch of notices expected to fly out soon. Meanwhile, down under in Australia, the government's playing a tough hand against immigration detainees refusing to cooperate. And over in Switzerland, a far-right figure found himself in a bit of a pickle, being escorted out of the region before he could dive into his speech on remigration. But wait, there's more drama brewing in the UK, with Chancellor Rishi Sunak facing a potential rebellion over plans to deport Afghan nationals who supported British armed forces. Across the pond, the US is tightening its asylum screening, but it's a drop in the ocean compared to the surge at the border. And, as we pivot to Australia, it seems the nation might dodge a recession, thanks to strong population growth. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's stirring the pot with his stance on school vaccine mandates, and South Asian students in the UK are still battling accusations of visa fraud from a decade ago. So, as the world turns and policies churn, it's clear immigration continues to be a hot-button issue. From legal battles to policy changes, the landscape is as dynamic as ever. Please stay tuned for the detailed content as we dive deeper into these stories and uncover what lies beneath the headlines. UK dispute over deportations to Rwanda heats up. Deutsche Welle. The UK government's plan to deport refugees to Rwanda is shameful and damages the country's reputation, says 91-year-old British peer and Holocaust survivor Alfred Dubs. The Safety of Rwanda, Asylum and Immigration bill has been refused by the House of Lords, as it violates international law, but Dubs predicts the Conservative majority will ultimately give in. If the bill is passed, almost 30,000 refugees who crossed the English Channel last year could face deportation to Rwanda. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has called for the deportation to have a deterrent effect and save costs. Rwanda wants staged start to deportation flights. Telegraph. The UK Home Office is expected to issue 100 deportation notices for migrants to be flown to Rwanda for the first time by the end of the week, if the proposed Safety of Rwanda bill is backed by Parliament. The first flights, however, are not expected to commence until the end of May, due to the 6 to 10 week appeals process for migrants outlined in the legislation. The Home Office has identified several risks that could delay the first deportation flights, including legal challenges, absconding, and protests. Labour has also revealed plans for a new 1,000 staff returns and enforcement unit to fast-track removals. Labour plans new defence in court clash over immigration detainees. The Sydney Morning Herald. The Australian government intends to block the release of more immigration detainees. The coalition will defend its decision to hold asylum seekers in detention if they refuse to cooperate with Australian authorities. This follows the release of 151 detainees after the High Court's decision last year to change migration law. The government is expected to lodge its submission to the High Court in April, with lawyers for the asylum seeker submitting their papers earlier this month. Prominent European far-right figure prevented from speaking at an event in Switzerland. Associated Press. Martin Sellner, a far-right figure from Austria, was prevented from delivering a speech at an event in Switzerland and was subsequently escorted out of the region. Sellner had been invited to discuss remigration and the ethnic vote at the event, which focused on the forced return of non-European immigrants to their countries of origin. Sellner was taken to a police station and escorted to Zurich after the electricity was turned off during his speech. Regional police stated that they ordered the event's organizers to end the event, but they did not comply. Sellner's speech was part of a string of events in Europe concerning the deportation of immigrants. Sunak facing potential rebellion over Rwanda deportation for Afghans. The Independent. UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak is facing a potential rebellion over plans to deport Afghan nationals who supported British armed forces to Rwanda. The House of Lords has backed an amendment to the Prime Minister's Small Boats Bill, which would prevent the deportation of those who supported the UK military to Rwanda. The amendment is one of several defeats for Sunak over the Rwanda bill in the House of Lords. The bill will now go through an extended tussle between the Commons and Lords during ping-pong, where legislation is batted between the two houses until agreement is reached. Biden toughened asylum screening. It won't contain a new border surge. Washington Post. American asylum officers are completing twice as many interviews per month as they did a year ago, and under the tighter rules, the percentage of migrants who are rejected and referred for deportation has more than doubled, according to the latest Department of Homeland Security data. But the number of people screened remains a small fraction of the number who cross the border illegally. And the government does not have the detention capacity to hold others long enough to interview them. The government has limited ability to reduce border crossings by adjusting the U.S. asylum system, whose delays and dysfunction are widely recognized as a driver of illegal immigration. The bipartisan Senate border bill that failed last month would have greatly increased deportation capacity, providing $6 billion for immigration detention and deportations and funds to hire up to 4,300 asylum officers, a fourfold staffing increase. Republican opposition sank the bill, which Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said would have delivered the most dramatic change to our system in decades. "We are doing what we can at a time when we continue to be starved for resources," Mayorkas said in an interview Friday. "It's about funding the system so that it is more efficient and effective," he said, rather than asking the government to work without giving it the resources to actually do the work. The nation is tipped to avoid a recession. But policymakers are walking a fine line. The Sydney Morning Herald. Analysts predict that Australia's strong population growth will prevent the country from falling into a recession this year. The economy is expected to rebound after June as tax cuts and lower interest rates begin to alleviate household cost of living pressures. However, economists believe that the Reserve Bank of Australia will hold the official cash rate at 4.35% due to concerns about inflation pressures. The economy is also facing a policy-induced slowdown, with interest rates and household debt affecting households. What if Trump does what he's saying he'll do? The Hill opinion. Donald Trump recently declared at a Virginia rally that if re-elected as president he would not give one penny to any school that has a vaccine mandate. Trump did not acknowledge, or does not know, that all 50 states require public school students to be vaccinated for several diseases, including hepatitis A and B, diphtheria, tetanus, polio, chickenpox, varicella, measles, mumps and rubella, with exemptions often allowed for medical reasons and reasons of conscience. South Asian students fight accusations of UK visa fraud 10 years on. Nikkei Asia. South Asians who were accused of cheating on English language tests and had their UK visas revoked or refused by the Home Office are still fighting to clear their names a decade later. More than 35,000 visas were revoked and refused following a BBC investigation into systemic cheating in 2014. Nearly 6,000 Pakistanis, 4,500 Indians, and 3,000 Bangladeshis were accused of cheating and lost their right to live, work, or study in the UK. Many have spent large sums on legal fees to try to overturn the Home Office ruling against them. India's citizenship law slammed as anti-Muslim and Modi's election ploy. South China Morning Post. India's implementation of a controversial citizenship law has sparked fears of discrimination against the country's Muslim population. The Citizenship Amendment Act, CAA, expedites citizenship for refugees fleeing religious persecution, but critics say it excludes Muslim refugees. The law's implementation, weeks before Prime Minister Narendra Modi seeks re-election, has reignited concerns about the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party's alleged anti-Muslim bias. Protests have erupted across India, with activists burning copies of the law. Legal experts argue that the CAA violates constitutional principles of equality. Home Affairs reverses visa cancellations for some Palestinians fleeing Gaza. ABC. The Australian government has reversed the cancellation of visas for some Palestinians who were fleeing Gaza. Many Palestinians had already left Gaza and were left stranded in third countries without a visa to travel to Australia. The government had initially cancelled the visas due to concerns about how the individuals had fled Gaza or changes in their circumstances. However, some of these decisions have now been reversed after additional security and other checks were conducted. It is not known how many visas had been cancelled or how many have been reinstated. Most of the visas granted to Palestinians are temporary visas with character requirements, and the intention is for the visa holders to eventually return home. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese stated that these decisions are made based on advice and individual circumstances. China is finally reaping what it sowed. Telegraph. China's complaint about the forced sale of TikTok is hypocritical, given that the country has banned several major U.S. social media platforms, including Facebook and YouTube. The sale of TikTok will be a significant deal, potentially reshaping the social media industry. The Chinese government's complaints about unfair competition are unfounded, given its own protectionist policies. China must choose between opening up its markets and accepting fair competition or facing restrictions on its own company's expansion into Western markets. Arizona and Nevada make up 3% of the U.S. population, and are vital to picking a president. Yahoo! When President Biden flies into Nevada on Monday and to Arizona the following day, he's likely to compliment the West's natural beauty, pay homage to the unmatched political power of the Culinary Workers Union and nod to local Democratic elected officials. Another truth about his visit to the two southwestern states may remain unspoken, though together they are home to only about 3% of the U.S. population. Arizona and Nevada are expected to have an outsized influence on the outcome of the 2024 presidential race. With Arizona's 11 electoral votes and Nevada's 6, the states collectively hold more voting power than Georgia, another closely contested state that both Democrats and Republicans believe they can win, as Biden and former President Trump engage in the first rematch of presidential contenders in nearly 70 years. We are delighted, government backflips on cancelled Gaza visas. The Sydney Morning Herald. Several Palestinians fleeing Gaza who had their visas to Australia cancelled have had them reinstated and will now be allowed to travel to the country. Of the 11 Palestinians affected, 8 have been told that their visas have been reinstated. The visas were cancelled when it was discovered that some of the Palestinians had left Gaza without explanation or that there had been a significant change in their circumstances. Advocates in Australia have welcomed the decision. Economics is in disarray, having placed efficiency before ethics and human well-being, says Nobel laureate. ABC. Angus Deaton, the British-American economist and Nobel laureate, has criticized mainstream economics for ignoring power dynamics and neglecting questions of equity. In an article for the International Monetary Fund, Deaton argues that the economics profession has become detached from its purpose of studying human welfare. He suggests that the profession needs to focus on predistribution mechanisms, such as promoting unions, place-based policies, immigration control, job preservation, and industrial policy, to prevent economic distress. Deaton also criticizes the profession's emphasis on efficiency, arguing that when efficiency is prioritized over equity, economic recommendations become little more than a license for plunder. Deaton's comments come after the publication of his recent book, Deaths of Despair and the Future of Capitalism, which examines the decline in well-being among American blue-collar workers. The IMF has asked 6 economists, including Deaton, to contribute to its magazine on the theme of how economics needs to change. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.